muted. Here we go. All right. Good day, everyone. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is untiled and will be recorded to our YouTube channel. We anticipate a very engaging, open discussion. MLPS was created on December 10th, 2022, on the foundation of hosting lectures open to all topics familiar to Freemasonry, but not limited to those for the betterment and improvement of the craft. We are a public organization that is not Grand Lodge sanctioned. We welcome everyone for enlightenment and growth. To cover some ground rules, MLPS is internationally extends its fraternal greetings and fellowship with siblings in a friendly and social manner. Our lectures are not a platform to engage in jurisdictional issues, but highly encourage fostering diversity, inclusion, harmony, and respect for all. As a disclaimer, any views expressed and/or opinions shared are solely the opinions of the participants and are not a reflection of their Grand Lodges nor lodges of affiliation. Therefore, please keep all conversations open to the public and in reflection of true fraternity. Today we have with us Brother Charles Harper Sr., and he's going to do some what I call overlooked lodge education, which is, Charles, you want to take it away from here? I mean, you really don't need an introduction. We all know who you are, but you know, you can take it over from here if you want.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. Again, my name is Charles M. Harper Sr. I'm a past master of Pleiades Lodge number 478 of the Grand Lodge of Illinois. I'm an honorary member of Eternal Light Lodge number 156 of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Illinois. And I even held membership in Internet Lodge 9659 of the United Grand Lodge of England. But what I'll be presenting today is not on behalf of any of those organizations. What I'll be presenting on is what I've been asked to present, and it's surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion being practiced in a live setting. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here, and we can get started. Let's see here, screen 2. Go turn this on, get everything going. All right. So again, I want to thank you for having me today. I really appreciate the platform. I always appreciate platforms to share useful information. So today we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the craft and its role in presenting and creating a harmonious society. And I want to put out a disclaimer. Last night I was on the Texas Freemasons Facebook page, and one of the brothers had made a post, and I commented to it about what I was going to be presenting today. And there was a lot of pushback. So I want to make it clear that this diversity, equity, inclusion in the context that we're going to be speaking about today has nothing to do with a political platform. It has nothing to do with teaching history, anything that you may have seen on TV about diversity, equity, inclusion, and imposing history lessons and so forth on other individuals. That is not what is going to be presented today. Today, we are literally looking at the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how those words alone, without any outside connotation to them, can allow us to become a better craft. So we all pretty much, if you're on this call, you either have heard about Freemasonry, or you are a Freemason yourself, whether in an all-male lodge or co-masonry or what have you. But I want to make sure that I level set an understanding for anyone that might be watching this as to what we're actually talking about. So Freemasonry is a century-old fraternity. In fact, it just celebrated 300 years not too long ago. And it upholds these principles of brotherhood, morality, and personal development. Its origins is out of the operative Masons, originally started in, well, there's always conversations about how it started, right? Whether the symbolism started in Egypt, whether the knowledge started in Egypt. But what we are going to go for as to level set is that its organizational founding is founded in London, out of those original 4 lodges in England. And from the operative craft to the speculative craft that we practice today, the instruments, the tools that the operative Freemasons use, we as Freemasons attached meanings to these symbols so that it would remind us as to how we are supposed to think and act. And each Freemason is obliged to follow certain obligations of the craft. And in a strange way, I'm going to connect what we learn in Freemasonry with the definitions of diversity, equity, inclusion. And at the end of this, I hope that I open minds to understand that if you are practicing Freemasonry in its truest form, you are already practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I want to start here and ask, can we be honest for a minute? You know, as much as Freemasonry espouses to be an inclusive organization, meaning when we say inclusive, we're saying that we welcome diversity of people, that we incorporate the diversity of people within the organization, right? That's truly what we're talking about by being inclusive. But how many, and I'm going with males because that is the majority of Freemasons, but how many human males have shown through word and action since before the 2 grand lodges of England united that we are actually practicing that, right? We know that Prince Hall, when Prince Hall first came to Freemasonry, that he was not allowed to become a Mason under the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts at the time. He had to become a Freemason under the Grand Lodge of Ireland, actually, at the time. So there has been division within the craft based on what we like to call immutable or our unchanging characteristics for centuries. And specifically here in the United States, these divisions were originally predicated on race. And from that time of exclusion based on race, our lodges, if we're going to be honest with each other, our lodges are exclusive now of more than race. Our lodges are exclusive of ideological positions. So Freemasonry, and I got this from NPR did a report on Freemasonry. And in the report, it said, a man, regardless of his religion, regardless of his social position, and regardless of his race, is eligible to be a member of the brotherhood. That promise is obviously really attractive to groups who are traditionally excluded. But the author goes on to say that the history of Freemasonry, the history has been a tension between this inclusive promise and oftentimes its exclusive practices. So let's start here. And in Freemasonry, and every person that's obligated, especially on the first degree, should recognize this symbol as the circumpunct, the point within the circle. And from the Grand Lodge of Ohio, Free and Accepted Masons websites, it says that Freemasonry has adopted its interpretation of this image with the point in the center of the circle representing the individual man or Mason. The circle represents the line between our passions, vices, prejudices, and those around us. This is very important. And as Masons, we work each day to prevent our selfish interests from passing beyond the circle and infringing on our duty to our God and fellow man. Now, this is very interesting because it's saying that the circle represents this line between our passions, vices, and prejudices. Now, where do those originate? Well, what we learn in Freemasonry is that the first degree of the craft is predicated on the heart. And what we are saying by that is the heart is the center of our emotions. And what we want to do in the first degree is learn how to regulate those emotions so that when we enter the second degree of Freemasonry, which is focuses on the liberal arts and sciences, which is more about how we think, right? Our reasoning, our logic. How do we use this frontal lobe that we as human beings have above all other creatures, the use of to determine logic and what is rational? How do we reconcile the emotions and our thinking so that we prevent ourselves from becoming extreme in our thinking or out of these due bounds of our relationship with fellow man? And I want to emphasize that when it says fellow man, we're talking all mankind, which includes women, which includes every type of human being that walks the earth. How do we, as Freemasons, conduct ourselves as this point with every person that lives? So that's what we're talking about. And if we're talking about regulating our emotions so that we can think using the symbol, what we're saying is that this symbol is transformative. Now, this symbol, this circumpunct, is not just a scene in Freemasonry. If we look through history, we'll see that ancient Egypt used a symbol for Ra, which represented God, the midday sun. It's the alchemical symbol for gold. Astronomy, it's the symbol symbolizes the sun. And even in psychology, this circumpunct can represent the self or our consciousness. So this symbol all through the ages has had a lot of meanings placed to it, but every society that has used this symbol has used it in a transformative way. Now, this circumpunct, which is literally one of my most favorite symbols in Freemasonry, it can represent a boundary line that a Freemason should not let their passions or prejudices exceed. And what do we mean by that? Well, we're saying that if we are the point within the circle and the line of the circle itself represents all humanity, then we should not allow our emotions or the reactions to our feelings being the lens in which we interpret our surroundings, our society. We should learn to manage our reaction to what we perceive. What we perceive as human beings is limited by our emotions, which are the basis of our prejudices. The symbol also reminds Freemasons to be decent and good towards their fellow humans and brothers. And I am sure that I am not the only one on this call or who will listen to this that can say that in recent years, since matching the presidential elections, we have seen a rise of our members. And this is due to, in my opinion, the access of social media and the internet. We've seen a lot of our members espouse behaviors where even Grand Lodges have had to create rules and regulations with how their members are to act online. This symbol also represents the circumambulation that a member takes as they are entering into the ritual, into the first, second, and third degree of Freemasonry around the altar in the lodge room. And it also, in the United States specifically, represents the St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist. In other jurisdictions, such as England, these lines represent other entities that they feel exhibit their representation of the craft. So what does it mean to subdue our passions? Let's really look at this, because if we're talking about being Freemasons to the full extent of what our rituals espouse us to learn and transform ourselves to be, then what we're looking at originally in the first degree is managing our emotions. So what does that really mean? Well, it means, as I show on the screen, obsessions with power and control. In our society, this is specifically for the male. This can be seen in toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity appears in a couple different ways. One of the most eminent ways that it appears is to be anti-feminine. So anything that represents feminism, toxic masculinity is going to oppose. And then one of the major attributes of toxic masculinity is the seeking of social power or financial power, obsessing with this. Another passion to subdue, and I've listed all the passions, is greed, right? Jealousy and envy, addiction, revenge, perfectionism, which is something that is one of the contributors to mental health illness in our society, depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideology, this goal of perfectionism, lust, fanaticism, that's the extremism, excuse me, that we're talking about, anger and pride. And let's be clear, one of the main things that we're taught in the first degree is to transform ourselves from the state of a rough ashlar to that of a smooth ashlar. Not a perfect ashlar, but a smooth ashlar. And this is, again, representative of the operative Freemason, and which they used to hew stone to cut to be better fit for building temples. In speculative Freemasonry, we talk about building our bodies, our minds being the temple, and that we are using the common gavel and the chisel to break off of these rough parts of ourselves to improve who we are. And what we're breaking off is these passions, these things that contribute to a negative representation of who we are and how we're to engage with other people. And so that point within the circle representing us, and that line, that circle, the line in which that we are talking about, we are to work on that space between ourselves and every aspect of humanity to resist that spurning of passion. So with that, I want to kind of talk about my path in Freemasonry. I wrote about some of it in my first book, Freemasonry in Black and White. But I want to go into something that I didn't necessarily disclose in that book. And this is kind of a testimony of the push and pull of inclusion and exclusion. And going back to that circumpunct, that is where we can impart that definition of inclusion to bring people in. Well, I will go with my definition of inclusion. And my definition of inclusion is to proactively solicit those with differing ideologies and bring them into a collaborative process. And from that collaborative process, their contributions can be seen manifested in the results. And just to put this out there, if we cannot always include everybody, obviously. And so for those that we can't include, then we owe them a genuine, valid, and honest reason as to why their contributions weren't included in whatever process we were working on at the time. So that's my definition of inclusion, and we'll go into more of that in a minute. But I want to tell a little bit about my journey into becoming worshipful master of Pleiades Lodge number 478. And I want to definitely give a shout out to my brother, Stephen Valle, who was the one who really asked me if I would be interested in being a part of the journey for Pleiades. And I want to go into why I am now not interested in practicing in the craft. So I started my regular journey in Freemasonry in 2010 at Kankakee Lodge in Kankakee, Illinois. And in that lodge, and I joined that lodge because I was originally a member of an unaffiliated lodge. And from that lodge, St. Elmo's Lodge number 70A, from that lodge, I sought to become a member of the regular craft. And that's what led me to Kankakee Lodge. So my journey into Freemasonry was not necessarily for brotherhood per se. My journey into Freemasonry was for enlightenment. I wanted to become a better thinker, become a better man for my family. And so as I entered into Kankakee Lodge, I quickly became active. I was, after I got a raise as a Master Mason, I was originally appointed as the senior deacon. And then I worked my way through the chairs. And one of the things that I brought to the lodge was education. And I'm sure some of us have had this experience where we have lodges where it's barely enough members to open the lodge. Well, once Kankakee Lodge allowed me to, and Gene Menard was the worshipful master at the time, and he allowed me to start presenting education. And what began to happen was we went from having barely enough members to open in that lodge to members visiting our lodge on stated meeting night from out of state. Our lodge began to be fuller and fuller of people coming to the lodge, not just for the brotherhood, but for the education. So as I worked myself through the chairs, there was a gentleman obviously in front of me working through the chairs. And on the day of elections, as I was junior warden, I was nominated to be worshipful master. The other gentleman that was senior warden at the time, he identified as white. I identified as Black, and I'll explain why that's important in a minute. The day of the elections, our lodge in Kankakee is a huge lodge. We saw a lot of older white male members that we had never seen before come to lodge that day, and they all paid their dues to become active so they could be eligible to vote. And that day, I lost become worshipful master, which was fine. But what was interesting is that one side of the lodge was we had diverse membership. We had Black people, Hispanic people, Cuban people. Stephen was there. Brother Cleveland was there. We had a lot of diverse individuals on one side of the lodge. And on the other side of the lodge was all white older males. Now, I lost the election, and what was said to me in my ear is that you didn't think we would allow, and they said the N-word, to become master over the senior warden. Now, once I heard that, I didn't want to react as my emotions wanted me to. I just took it in because that wasn't the time or place. And I had previously had issues dealing with racism itself in that lodge. And so after I didn't become worshipful master and seeing what was happening in the lodge and receiving that message, I decided at that time that I was not going to be able to learn what I wanted to learn being a member of that lodge. And that's what drew me to Pleiades Lodge number 478. And so what happened at Pleiades Lodge was an act of inclusion. As I became member of the lodge was already holding education, and then education became more of a focus. And I would say that in my time in Freemasonry, up until 2016, the end of my year as master, I think I learned more about myself. I became much more conscious about my spirituality, about how I think about things, about dealing with my emotions, and to really how to be a good person, not just for my family, but to contribute to society better. And so that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book Freemasonry in Black and White, was to contribute, because now Pleiades Lodge had given me something, Freemasonry had given me something that I could now give back. So why do I bring up this story? Well, it's not to focus on racism, because that's not the point. The point was exclusion. Why was I excluded? Why was I excluded from advancing based on race? Well, racism is a prejudice just like sexism or any other prejudice, and it's seated in our emotional mind. And again, this involves Freemasonry because what we're talking about in the first degree is the regulation or the better management of our emotions. We say we come to Freemasonry to subdue our passions and improve ourselves in the craft. So what happens in the brain in this emotional space when we are confronted with something we are uncomfortable with, and this is all the way in the unconscious mind, it rings a bell in our head. And this bell, if we wanted to talk biologically, is in the limbic system. But what triggers this bell, this little ding-a-ling, this little ding-a-ling in our head, ding, 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 this bell is things that are unfamiliar, that represent maybe past traumas. Maybe it represents something that is in our memories that we learned that we're not even aware of. And an example of that related to race would be individuals that have lived in an unfamiliar place with, let's say, Hispanics or Asians or Blacks or any other ethnicity or race that that exists. Well, if they're unfamiliar with it, and based on how they've been raised, they may have an unconscious bias against, an implicit bias against those individuals. And this triggers an emotional reaction in the mind where it starts to limit our ability to reason. Literally our cognitive functions start to decrease because what our body is doing is starting to react to defend itself against something that's unfamiliar. And this is our emotions working for us. And I like to say that when we have high emotions, and just like that old phrase says, you never want to make an important decision in an emotional moment, that old adage rings true because it's supported by science. When we're in a high emotional state, most likely we're going to make a bad decision. So I want to bring some education to this, and I hope, let's see, I hope that this plays. I don't know if it will or not, but let's see if it does. Let's see if it does. And let me know if the volume comes through here. It's not. Let me take off this. Let me stop sharing and redo it because I'm going to have to add the sound in. I don't think I added the sound in.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, that's what you have.
So let's share sound. All right, let's do that again. Let's see if it comes up for us. All right, let's see. There we go.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
So that is essentially it, right? And we're talking about the first degree of Freemasonry. And I'll give a real-time example. Last evening, I was in the Texas Freemasons Facebook group, and like I was saying earlier, and I had shared what I was going to be doing today. And the moment that the words diversity, equity, and inclusion appeared, we started to see some negative reactions to it. Well, why was the negative reactions occurring if the individuals didn't know the context in which I was speaking about diversity, equity, inclusion? Well, further investigation, we can see that I saw that these members, when you go to their personal pages, were representing ideologies that are primarily spoken about in a certain political party. So what their brains did was they attached these words, diversity, equity, inclusion, to the opposite political party in their brains. And I can't speak to whether they did it consciously or not, but unconsciously, this is simply how the brain works. It attached it to that. And because they are in opposition to that other political party, their reactions to it represented or symbolized or mocked, if you will, the same reactions that persons in the opposite political party have towards diversity, equity, inclusion. And so they were exclusive of what I was saying, not based on any context, definition, or understanding of what I was presenting. They were not interested in understanding at all because of the words themselves. So their emotional mind took over their conscious mind, right? Their cognitive or ability to reason and using logic now and excluded me. And what's interesting is that when we are in that emotional space, we feel that we're thinking. But as science will tell us, human beings are mammals just like a dog, a primate, an elephant. We're a mammal, and mammals, all mammals, use emotions to protect ourselves, right? And so that unconscious mind is going to go to the limbic system, and it's going to say, hey, do we recognize this? And that affinity bias starts to work, and it attaches these different things that we're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and it's going to determine before we can do it in our cognitive mind whether we're safe or not. And it starts to exclude at that point. So if we can't manage our emotions, we are being often unintentionally exclusive of people, ideas, opportunities that could benefit us and grow us as people without our having even known it. So let's look at different types of emotions. We have positive emotions and negative emotions. Positive emotions, activity, tranquility, determination, happiness, all these positive things. These are the things that make us feel good. Negative emotions, sadness, jealousy, anxiety, devaluation, fear, indifference, anger, disgust, boredom, and passiveness. Men in the United States and probably often in other parts of the world have a higher suicide rate predicated on the inability or the feeling as if they cannot express emotions, or they have not been taught how to manage emotions. And there is often a high level of anxiety or depression and definitely stress that contributes to morbidity, which means that men are dying earlier in the United States than women, mostly predicated in this mental health space, mostly predicated on the inability to manage our emotions, i.e. Freemasonry, subdue our passions. And so that's what we're talking about in this first degree of Masonry with the circumpunct. How do I subdue my passions and improve myself in Masonry? And so I got into diversity, equity, and inclusion because of Freemasonry, literally because of it, because I came to understand I was trying to relate what I was learning in the first degree of Freemasonry in a way that I could teach other people without violating my obligations as a Master Mason under the Grand Lodge of Illinois. And diversity, equity, and inclusion was that pathway for me. And as I write, by improving ourselves, our heart, and our mind, we can remain within due bounds of everyone else. This act is demonstrating the diversity of people and thoughts, being equitable with our fellow person, and providing a safe space for them to be welcomed with their differences into our lives. Remember, the brain does not learn more knowledge without it being confronted with different ideas and different knowledge. That's how literally the brain works. As I tell my students, knowledge doesn't seep into the brain until you do something with it, until you make that knowledge applicable. So as Freemasons, if we're memorizing the ritual, memorizing our catechism so that we can demonstrate proficiency, that's great, because that is improving the mind, right? It's improving by memorizing, we're working our cognitive abilities. But if we don't take that information that we're learning, if we don't dissect it, if we don't challenge it with ourselves and others, how are we applying that knowledge? And so we're talking now about how implicit bias works with creating exclusion. And just like I said earlier, when we are triggered, right, ding-a-ling-a-ling, that bell goes off in our head, we start to exclude people, just like the good brothers did in that Texas Freemasons page last night. The brothers that were not receptive to this concept of diversity, equity, inclusion. In fact, one called it evil, right? Literally called it evil. And that was based on their perception, their life experience, and it represented a major political ideology about diversity, equity, inclusion. So let's look at this video, and let's look at what this implicit bias thing, this emotional reaction, this auto-emotional reaction, let's look at how it affects us as human beings.
Your brain, by some accounts, receives roughly 11 million pieces of information each second, but your conscious brain is only able to process about 40. How do you handle all the rest? You handle it because you're really using two brains. Your conscious brain, which works with facts and data, has very little capacity and processes information slowly, and your unconscious brain, which is habit and intuition driven, has huge capacity and is really fast. One of your unconscious brain's best tricks is its ability to recognize patterns and use them to assign people and things to categories, allowing your unconscious brain to deal with all of the known, not dangerous issues, and leave only the few unknown or dangerous issues to your conscious brain. This allows us to recognize a pattern and act on it, rather than having to think about every interaction as if we were experiencing it for the first time. We can glance at that four-legged animal and know if it's a wolf or a cocker spaniel. That recognition allows us to make assumptions about the animal facing us, that the wolf belongs to the wild animal category and is likely to be dangerous, or that the cocker spaniel is in the domestic dog category and not likely to be dangerous. The assumptions we make about these pattern groups are likely to be based on our own experiences, on information we have gained from our culture or background, or from the media we listen to or people we admire. Unfortunately, those assumptions are often wrong. When we categorize people, our brains apply two other tools. One is affinity bias, a hardwired preference to respond positively to people who look, sound, and act like ourselves. Brain imaging scans show that when people are shown images of faces that differ from their own, it activates in milliseconds activity in the part of the unconscious brain that alerts us to possible danger. This may reflect a survival tool left over from ancient times when danger often came from those outside our immediate group. Today, however, this means the associations and biases are likely to be unconsciously activated every time when we come across a member of a group. even if we consciously reject group stereotypes. In addition to affinity bias, our unconscious brain categorizes people into groups and then connects those groups to our learned ideas or constructs about what is good or bad. Now, we've decided whether someone is like us or not, and whether they're good or not, all within milliseconds of meeting them. So, what can you do to manage your unconscious biases? You've already started by just learning about unconscious bias. Now, identify your own biases and address one at a time by building inclusive habits. Remember, if you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude.
So I'll give an example. Yesterday, I'll give a real life example of this. So yesterday, and I'm a teacher by trade. So yesterday I'm going to be coaching mock trial students who are going to be acting as attorneys and so forth in a real life trial situation. And as I was leaving the facility where the luncheon was occurring, and I'm on my motorcycle, I'm exiting the parking garage, and for the sake of understanding what I'm about to say, I identify as Black. My mother's white, my father's Black. I identify as Black. That's my race. My ethnicity is African American, Irish, English. That's my ethnicity, but I identify racially as Black. And so I have on my helmet, I have on my glasses, and I look like a white guy. And as I'm exiting the garage, the attendant, he asked me to turn off my motorcycle as I'm giving the ticket. And he starts to share with me about how he had a motorcycle like mine, and he liked mine and his experiences. And while sharing an experience of how hard it is to ride a motorcycle with traffic nowadays, he said to me, yeah, and these doggone immigrants, I don't know if they were Mexican or Indian. I just know that they weren't American, and I don't even know why they're here, but they tried to tell me how to ride my bike. Now, why did this person that did not know me, have never met before in life, had never had a conversation before in life, feel so comfortable sharing something with me that was actually xenophobic and racist? Well, he probably didn't think it was xenophobic or racist. He probably thought that, his thoughts were good about this, and he shared it with me because of his affinity bias. What I looked like, the motorcycle that I was riding, all made him comfortable in sharing, made him feel safe, and that's an emotional space. So that's an example of how affinity bias, or for a grander sake, how this unconscious or implicit bias works to affect the dynamics between us. It lets us know before we can realize it if we're safe or not. If we don't feel safe, we are defensive, we are dismissive, we put people off, we find ways to exclude them, right? If we feel safe, then we're going to be inclusive. We're going to bring them in. And so now I want to level set what really diversity, equity, and inclusion actually mean. And I want to start with diversity. And that's the circle here, this intersection circle that you see on top. So let's look at this for a second. In the center of the circle, you see the 6 immutable characteristics. Now, these are covered by legally by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, our age, sexual orientation and identity, ethnicity, race, and we just said there's a difference between race and ethnicity, gender, which is how we identify with each other in our sexual orientation, and then physical abilities or qualities, and this is those that are physically limited, whether they're they've had a severed body part or something to that function. Now, outside of this circle, you'll see a lot of other labels: marital status, functional specialty, military experience, parental status, geographic location. All of these things, these attributes together form and where they meet society within us forms the lens in which we see the world. Let me see if I can simplify that. Intersectionality, the composition of who we are is the lens in which we experience the world. And that interaction between the accumulation of who we are and how we meet the world creates the lens in which we view society, our implicit bias, our safety parameters. Are we going to be safe or not? So I know that politically, diversity is seen as a negative to a large demographic of people. But when we're talking about diversity, we're really talking about the accumulation of all of who we are in our ideas. So we're talking our ideas is the diversity that we're seeking, not just a Black person, an Asian person, a lesbian, a transgender, a physically disabled person, an older person. It's the accumulation of who we are in our mind. That ideology is the diversity that we should be seeking to include. As far as equity, as you can see at the top right hand of the screen, equity is not giving someone something that they do not deserve. Equity is an ability to lift people so that they can have an equal opportunity. So what does that mean? Let's look at the visual. On the right side, on the left side, you see equality, but there are a tall, medium, and a short person there. And then you have fruit on this branch. Now, the tall person can easily reach that fruit. The person in the middle, a little bit harder. They might have to get on their toes. And that smaller person, they're going to have to leap to try to get that fruit. Now, if we tell all of these individuals, hey, we're giving you an equal opportunity to get this fruit, do they actually have an equal opportunity? No, they don't have an equal opportunity because their natural or unchanging attributes, their immutable characteristics prevent them from having an equal opportunity. So what equity is can I lift the deficiencies that this person has so that they can have an equal opportunity? So equity is not an evil thing. It actually allows us to bring in more attributes from individuals that would previously been excluded because we're now meeting them where they are rather than saying, well, because you're shorter, you just can't do this, right? So that's equity. And then inclusion, as I said before, inclusion is the proactive solicitation of those whose ideologies, dispositions, mindsets are different than ours. We want those because what those are going to do is challenge our own implicit bias, our own conclusion. It's like the saying that says, let's put some fresh eyes on it. Let's have someone else look at this project rather than just we assume that it's done so that we can make sure that we didn't miss anything. Why? Because we have implicit bias, right? Because of this implicit bias, this affinity bias, we might think we did a great job. But if we bring someone else who has maybe the same skill set, the same education background, but their life experiences have been different, we bring them to look at the project, they may see something that we don't see. And that thing that they saw was what was going to help this project to not just be good, but fantastic. That's what we mean by inclusion. It's not giving an unfair opportunity to someone that didn't deserve it. It's literally, how can we make this thing, whatever it is, better by bringing in different sets of eyes to contribute to what we're doing. So that's really what we're talking about with inclusion. So just a note, because I've worked in corporate government, I just want to give the other benefits of this diversity, equity, inclusion. And we know for a fact, statistical fact, that companies that use this type of thinking, this proactively seeking diverse populations, diverse ideologies, seeking to be equitable, giving helping others to come to a point where they can be equal so that everyone grows. And then the inclusion, bringing these different ideas into whatever we're working on. Well, McKinsey and Company found that it increased their performance, their profitability by 33%. Another company said that their business decisions improved by 87%. Another company said that they had 19% higher revenues. This all goes back to that simple adage of putting fresh eyes on a project, having someone else look at it, right? And then in our personal lives, if we're not using inclusion in our personal lives, in our relationships, we might be having unfulfilled relationships. If we're not saying, hey, honey, if we're married and we're talking to our partner, hey, what do you think about this? Well, that asking of what do you think about this is an act of inclusion. How are you feeling right now? Oh, wow, you're feeling this way. How can I support you in your feelings? That's an act of inclusion. Our friends. So this idea, and I hate that politics took this, and then some practitioners focused on trying to push history of historical suffrage on others. I don't like that happened, because that took away from the benefits of this diversity, equity, inclusion. But bringing it back to Freemasonry, Freemasonry has been practicing diversity, equity, and inclusion since the ritual was written. And that's where I'm going here now, back to Freemasonry itself, and saying that the same dynamic that exists within most companies exists with Freemasonry, which, as we teach, is a progressive moral science. Literally, Freemasonry, the ritual itself, mirrors the practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the exclusion factor is the ballot box. And I will say that I have been affected by the ballot box. I have been excluded by the ballot box in my father's own lodge. And something I've never shared before. I literally petitioned my father's lodge when I was leaving the irregular lodge. Naturally, I wanted to go to my father's lodge. And back then, I think Yahoo was the social media that a lot of brothers used at a time. And I had been invited to visit the brothers of my dad's lodge. And I met with them, and it was some kind of study session. Well, I didn't know the rules of regular Freemasonry. And I heard later that I wasn't supposed to be there, because in this chat group, I said that I was there. So when I petitioned the lodge, they came to my house, they sat down, they interviewed me. I was asked different parts of Freemasonry, the 5 orders of architecture. And I was asked the question, what are the 4 orders of architecture? And I said, well, there's 5 orders of architecture. And I don't know if that contributed to me being blackballed, but I do know that I was blackballed from being in that lodge. Well, why was I blackballed? Well, in my mind, it had to be related to both my knowing Freemasonry at that moment of the interview better than the person asking me. And then by speaking about what happened in the chat group, I was blackballed from that lodge. And fortunately, I was able to petition another lodge within the legal amount of time you had to wait, and I was accepted into regular Freemasonry. But again, here's an example of how emotions, rather than logic and reason, ruled the minds to exclude a person rather than include, and based on an understanding and acceptance. So here we are. Diversity is more than the define of our immutable characteristics. When we live out our lives, who we are, our memories, feelings, and emotions, they all interact with every person that we see or meet, and they enter into every situation that we experience in our lives. And so diversity is ultimately found in our thoughts and conclusions, our physical attributes, how we meet society. All of that forms our thoughts and conclusions. That's the diversity really of who we are. Equity is more than accommodating a physical or intellectual impairment being experienced by another person or being 50-50 with someone. Using emotional intelligence and being trauma-informed allows for the ability to emotionally meet another person where they are in need. Deficiencies where inequity exists must be met before equality has a chance to even be practiced, right? And this is that balance between the first degree and the second degree, the heart and the mind. That's this inequity. And inclusion is more than asking another person what they thought or adding a space for a person whose ideas contrast the majority. And what we mean by that is having a seat at the table. Bringing a different person in and giving them a seat at a table is not inclusion. Allowing someone to get a job when they're not qualified based to meet a quota is not inclusion. Inclusion is the incorporation of ideas presented by those whose thoughts differ into the ultimate goal of the mutual pursuit. And if the addition cannot be incorporated, a reasonable and logical reason must be provided using transparency as to not destroy the trust and courage it takes to share private thoughts and feelings in the first place. This is what inclusion really is. So as I close this today, in one's personal life and professional life, increasing knowledge provides that more understandings can be known, but managing emotional reaction to one's feelings allows for that ability to engage critical thinking skills that allow for the application of the knowledge to the decision being made. And as a Freemason, I'm obliged to remain in due bounds of all mankind. And to do that, it requires me to subdue my passions, which means I have to manage my emotional reactions to what I perceive, to my feelings. And that ultimately, if we as Freemasons in this society, and even those publicly using this idea, these attributes of diversity, equity, inclusion, by using these things, by creating a safe space between each other, between the point and the circle, this is how we as Freemasons can really improve the society by making good men better. And with that, I close my presentation and would love to open this up to any kind of questions.
Well, first, thank you. Thank you, Brother Charles. We needed this. We needed this. My camera on? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm looking to
Oh,
places.
I see my brother Oscar on here. What's going on, good brother? Yes. But I'm sorry. I just saw Oscar. I had to say what's up.
Okay. I saw him too. I was gonna wait. But your journey reflects my journey. I think mine probably is a little bit more harsher and I will just, be transparent with everyone here. I'm actually took a step back from Freemasonry, but I still love doing the educational piece, like doing discussions like this. I was a member of the Women's Grand Lodge of Belgium, the Washington, D.C. Lodge, and Muna. I was a member for probably, I think, like 10 years. So I experienced a lot of exclusion to the point where it was time to, like step up and wanting to be worshipful master. The ladies took me to brunch twice to discourage me from running for worshipful master. I didn't get it. So I just felt like, a lot of people came in behind me, but I had the knowledge, I'm good with people. So I just felt like I did all I can do here. I wanted to be the voice of reason, of change, and inclusion to bring more women of color from every background, so they can experience the craft, from our perspective. That didn't work out, so I headed to New York to help out Universalist Lodge. They started blackballing me, following me there, joined George Washington Union,
Yeah.
doing stuff with that. It got to the point where it was time for me to step up to be the president of Maryland Masonic Research Society. They engaged in election fraud.
Yeah, it's Freemasonry is a microcosm of society, right?
Right.
And all these human interactions are going to be similar. You know, the reason that Black people in particular were excluded from a lot of lodges is because of the ballot box, right? We can hide our prejudice through the ballot box because, you know, that ballot box is secret. No one knows who voted, right? So no one can be held accountable. Even as I spoke about the racist things that I was hearing in Lodge, you can't prove anything because of this, because of our ritual with the ballot box, right? But that's what we're saying. We're saying that if we're going to improve ourselves, specifically in the first degree, subduing that passion, well, our emotions are the foundation of our prejudicial thinking without us even being cognizant of it, right? And once we get into those echo chambers that reinforce how we already think, well, it just becomes more concrete. And we know from psychology and biology that if we don't deem a person credible, they can show us a specific fact that is indisputable. They won't believe it. And that's why it's almost impossible to convince someone of something different than what they believe, right? And that's why Freemasonry, you have to enter it of your own free will and accord. You can't be pushed into it, because then you won't accept the teachings that's going to be presented to you. So I do see we have a couple questions.
Yep.
Theo, I see Theo Jones has a question. You're on mute, brother.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. Your journey is very similar to mine. I was the first Black worshipful master of my lodge in 119 years. Was a district lecturer for the Grand Lodge of Colorado. Served in all four bodies in New York, right? As high priest, thrice illustrious master, and commander. Was never invited to join KYCH because of several things. Colorado, even though they say that they have diversity, equity, and inclusion, they are in practice, as you know, it's quite different what happens behind the tables. And It was almost like I dared to reach too high, kind of thinking of the Icarus, story.
Sure.
And so, when I got to the district lecture level, the politics came into play.
Yep. Yep. And they often do. And it's literally no different than any corporation, any organization. It's literally the same practices that you see within the craft are existing without the craft. And that became a problem for me, in that if I'm seeing within the craft what the world is already exhibiting, then why am I in the craft? What am I learning here? Right? I'm not here for a title. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn. And if I'm not being instructed better than what I'm experiencing in the corporate world or in education or in government, then I'm wasting my time.
And that's how I felt as well. I'm not a title chaser. Anytime I've had the opportunity to serve, I did to the best of my abilities.
Sure.
Because it was about service, not the title.
100%. 100%.
And so, I was just curious. I read some snippets of Freemasonry in black and white before, being biracial myself, though ethnic wise, I'm 8 different nationalities or 8 different ethnicities. You know,
Sure,
I'm
sure.
everything except for, as my daughter said, we're not Asian. That's like only
the only one left out.
But you know, I found myself, even though I still have a love and I still practice Freemasonry, you know, taking that drift away because I'm involved in organizations that I feel are more worth my time spiritually and
Absolutely.
more enjoyable and more rewarding spiritually. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on you know, with and I was told point blank in the 120th year of my lodge was the 150th anniversary of the Grand Lodge in the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Colorado, ancient free and accepted Masons. The secretary was the deputy Grand Master the year that I was master, and I was one of his. You know, I considered him a friend and a mentor.
Yeah.
But my version of Masonry was a little bit different, as I brought a lot of education, and the officers behind me brought a lot of education into the lodge, which some of the past masters didn't like.
Been there.
It was too esoteric for them.
Been there.
So but if we weren't educating our membership, we weren't practicing a degree or part of a degree, I wasn't doing my job as master. So every meeting we had something. We didn't ever have just a straight business meeting.
Yeah, I was the same way as master. Absolutely.
Anyway, that's my story. I just wanted to get your opinion on you know, those that have tried to. And I was told, you know, if you don't have $70,000 to $100,000, you will never be Grand Master, because that's what it takes from Grand Marshal to Grand Master in Colorado. And so a lot of people that are deserving or have the abilities that could help the craft don't get there because of
I didn't know that.
So wanted to get your opinion on those types of things.
And specifically the having to, because I don't know about people having to pay to get in the Grand Line.
Can I tap in?
Yeah.
That is a blatant discouragement, misinformation that is purposely provided to dissuade people from applying or addressing their interests.
And just so everyone knows, Oscar Alina is the former junior Grand Warden of the Grand Lodge of New York. So he's got a little credibility speaking about this.
But yeah, people say that to discourage people. And I've seen it implemented and people believe it until you get into Grand Line and you find out they got a budget for you to be able to travel, to you do all the stuff. So the perspective that you need to do this, to go to dinners, to go all that, it is purposefully done to dissuade people from wanting to pursue their dreams or pursue the opportunities. So I'm sorry.
Well, there you go, Brother Jones.
Yeah. That explains a lot, and that's how it was presented, is, you know, with the amount of traveling that you have to do within the jurisdiction and outside. And I understand
it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I thank you for the question. Let's go to Dr. McAllister.
Oh, thank you so much. Great job.
Thank you.
And I just want to make a couple comments. I want to take this to the next level. I identify as white, but I'm really Black, Irish, and Indian. So I have been reveling in immersing myself. It is to understand it. My focus is on environmental justice. As an environmentalist, I'm used to being in a room full of middle-class white people. And environmental justice is not a room full of middle-class white people.
No.
And I want to, the lady who spoke, I can't remember her name. We need to focus on the sacred and divine feminine. What you spoke to is a male oriented, top-down focus. Melvin Connor at Emory wrote a wonderful paper called "A Better World Run by Women." I'm going to put that in the chat.
Thank you. If that was only the case in my obedience.
And the male fight or flight thing is from the hypothalamus.
Yep.
It's a survival technique
Yep.
for that worked up until about 1,000 years ago when we started getting really close to each other. The other thing is, we have all this information up here in our heads, but that doesn't change anything. There's a really good paper. It's called Backfire. And the more, if you have correct information in your head and I have misinformation, the more that you insist you're right, the more defensive I get. So we need to go from here to here. The 17 inches from the mind to the heart is the longest distance in the world.
Absolutely.
Marshall Rosenberg, compassionate communication. I want to tie that to Taoism and the language of leadership. And finally, the other thing is, this is so timely because I have been focused. I'm also on, spoiler alert. So I'm on the steering committee for the 10-year plan to end homelessness, where my job is storytelling. So I'm working on my PhD in BS.
Nice.
And my friends think that I already have it. So you've been warned. I'm hoping we can put an email list together on this, because I really would like to stay connected with this group. But finally, compassionate communication doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for people who have been subjected to trauma.
Sure.
Paul Alt Architecture. And so I just celebrated 20 years in recovery on June 21st.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And miracle upon miracle upon miracles. The fact that I'm alive and sober and relatively healthy is just, it's beyond my explanation. I have to thank my higher power and Alcoholics Anonymous for that. The trauma is the next step. What we're going to be focusing on. There's a huge meeting coming up in Montreal in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to save that for. I'm hoping that will be our next conversation. So
Sure.
Thanks again. I love you guys. Thanks for being.
Appreciate it. Yeah, and just to piggyback a little bit on what you said, you're absolutely right. These tribal systems were originally very masculine oriented, and these were during those chiefdom societies where you needed big men to fight off warring tribes. And this translated into literally this masculine oriented society that we have right now, where females, which have better use of both hemispheres of their brains at the same time than males do, in fact. And then females have, leading to more of that toxicity. Females are, in this society, males are often taught, expressing emotion is weakness, whereas the female are allowed to speak about how they feel. So there's a lot of contributing factors to this toxic masculinity, including, like you said, trauma. I also have PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And it wasn't until I went to therapy for it and got it well managed that I was able to really comprehend this distance between the cognitive mind and the emotional mind. That cognitive mind, I was in therapy real quick and I was doing my doctor of psychology at the time. And I could tell that therapist everything about everything that was going on with me. And she said, Charles, that's well and fine that you can explain these things to me, but nothing's going to change with you emotionally until we get to the root of your trauma, because every time you're triggered, your emotional mind is going to take over. And that knowledge that you have means nothing. So I just wanted to piggyback and support what you said. So thank you so much. I see Dr. Aline. He doesn't like doctor a whole lot. Oscar, what's good, man?
Yeah, but Josh was ahead of me on the queue.
Oh, Josh was? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Josh, what you got?
I just a comment. So first of all, I just want to say when I went through my degrees, the first thing that I remember that had the biggest impact on me continuing in Freemasonry was that same lesson early on, which is that we are there to restrain our passions and subdue our passions and improve ourselves in Masonry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that to me was the beginning and the end of it, right? I immediately connected that observation, that call to action with my own understanding of how humans can work together to cooperate to build the temple of society, if you will, or sort of
Absolutely.
living stones.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
And so I just wanted to thank you. I actually not long ago, well, I guess it was 2 years ago now, gave a talk on the neurobiological basis of behavior, also to a group of Freemasons.
Nice.
Yeah, because my
Nice.
past work was in combating discrimination, harassment, and violence at federal facilities.
Right.
Right. And so, for me,
Yeah.
there was this kind of disconnect between the work that I was doing and where we were trying to better understand behavior and why people made decisions and acted in certain ways, and what I was seeing in Lodge.
So I was telling your story.
I mean, I think it sounds like we've had similar experiences. So,
Yeah.
you see that it's clear that there's a difference between the expectations we have in the business world or in government versus, what we see in Lodge. And to me, it's like, well, what makes the most sense here? And recognizing that our values are what they are, if we behave the way we think our values tell us to, then, the one that's wrong is probably not the one that's telling us we can figure out how to work together.
Probably not. Probably not. I absolutely agree with you. And that's literally how I got onto this path of creating some kind of diversity, equity, inclusion program, because I wasn't seeing it in Lodge. I wasn't seeing this. And I didn't know at the time it was called inclusivity. I was searching for, like, how can I make my Lodge better, right? How can I do, this, we have this sect here. Everybody's not getting a lot, certain groups would come to Lodge when other groups weren't there, and then you see the divisiveness, every time you go to Grand Lodge and you see all the members from all the districts, you see the division, so that began my journey, and like education and everything else just kind of filtered in these understandings of why we unconsciously push each other away. And then my focus began to, well, how do I overcome that unconscious, that affinity bias, right? The affective affinity, but how do we overcome that? And that's how I arrived here. So I have symmetry with you. So thank you very much.
The last thing I just want to add is that you're right about the ballot box too. I've seen it used to discriminate against people when people are not exploring their unconscious biases. They carry those biases right to the ballot box.
Right to the ballot box.
Conversation we have to have.
Yep, and the Lodge loses at that point. Yeah. All right, Brother Lean.
First, always a pleasure to support you and to see you taking the bull by the proverbial horns.
Appreciate that.
And forcing folks to have that uncomfortable conversation. And I do wish that there were a lot more people here to experience that, but I always applaud you and support you from that endeavor. One of the things from a comment/question that I thought was quite unique is the hypocrisy of even the reaction to having these conversations. As you go across the US, there's several aspects of Freemasonry that speak the words equity, equality in their language, in their ritual, in their opening and closing. They speak the word, but have a visceral negative reaction to the application of those words. And no doubt, I'm not, compile on as many of the war stories that we have and continue to have.
Continue to have.
As what I've even recently experienced, as you know. and continue not to falter, because when we allow ourselves to be defeated, and this is no way sake of admonishing anyone who decides to step away, etc., because you have to do what's right for your health and your wealth and your physical well-being and mental well-being, but also recognizing that there's times when we do have to fight, not for ourselves, but for those who are coming behind us.
As a bridge builder does.
Because it is hard. And
Yes.
the easiest way of dissuading allows those who are like, well, if they can do that to him or her, they can do that to me or anyone else.
Absolutely.
But it is a difficulty that does require the ability to have a safe space for folks to speak freely, to find each other, and to build on it, even if the world around or loud people around are trying to dissuade from it. So
I like that word, loud people.
I just wanted to big you up for that. And, as always, good work.
Appreciate that. And for those that don't know, Oscar has been a mentor of mine for, I don't know, is it like 20 years now? I'm not sure how long it's been, but so those words that you speak to me, definitely, I definitely received those in the full intent that you made them. So I appreciate that, brother. Absolutely. All right. Is that about it?
Well, I do want to call somebody out. I know she's going to be mad with me and smack my hand afterwards. But my past master from New York is on. Jamila, do you have any thoughts or comments that you want to share? She's probably trying to figure out how to unmute or thinking of what to say. Maybe not.
There is a question in the chat. It asks, why? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you there?
I am.
Okay.
We're talking about masonry, but the stories that I'm hearing reminds me of grammar school. And all of the things, and all of the, I'm going to say New Yorkers, because we're supposed to be, above the questions of our liberal selves. But it happens, and it continues to happen. But I bring you greetings from North Carolina today. As Cleo said, I am, or was the I am the past worshipful master of the Women's Lodge of Belgium. And some of the things that Cleo has talked about in many of her conversations have happened to me, but for me, it happened very, very differently because of, I guess, my exposure to both sides of the race and ethnicity scale. My grandfather was white, and my mother always wondered why she couldn't be white because of her mother. And it was interesting that Dr. McAllister said that he identifies as white. But anyway, so it's been, but I think in my lodge particularly, I was okay because I wasn't ruffling feathers. Little did they know. Little did they know.
I was doing it.
We're like Cleo's co-signing for you.
So I like I said before, I bring you greetings. And I also encourage your faith and courage to stay in the long fight and continue to do the work that we need to do.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I want to make sure we clarify, because the focus isn't specifically on race or political dispositions in why we exclude, right? Oftentimes it's as the science says, and Josh said, our cumulative experiences in life, our brain takes those in, and just like any mammal, I use this example. I teach human geography as well. And I use an example when I'm speaking with my students of how we as mammals perceive things and how that emotional reaction works, right? If, you know, a long time ago, we didn't have streets, you know, we didn't have everything that we see today. And when we're in this hunter-gatherer space, and we're on our hunting path and it's at night, you know, if we hear an unfamiliar sound, you know, our attributes, our hearing, our sight, everything, it gets acutely focused on whatever the sound was, just like any mammal does. And when that happens, even our vision becomes more acute. Our peripheral vision starts to become limited. We start getting, our hands will start getting pasty and clammy. Our digestive system slows down, all because the body is getting ready to prepare for this fight or flight response. And what's interesting is the disconnect between that and how we exist in these modern times is that our body, our brain reacts exactly the same way to a difference of opinion or a person's appearance that we're not familiar with. The brain starts this natural process that it's been doing for millions of years. It does the exact same thing. And the only way to really get around that is this familiarity with the difference. And how we get to the familiarity is subduing our passions, is regulating that emotion and cognitive. And I had, you know, being that I had mental health issues before and having to work through therapy through them, I bring some of that with my teaching. I have to ask myself, this feeling that I'm feeling, is it the reality of what is happening? Or is it a manifestation of something I previously experienced? And I can give a perfect example. In my previous relationship, we went to couples counseling, and this is before therapy. And we would be sitting on the couch, having those discussions as couples do in therapy. And the person said something to me, the person I was in a relationship said something to me, and I responded to them as if they had said something else. And the person said, I didn't just say that. And I said, yes, you did. And the therapist said, no, Charles, she didn't. I was hearing, because of the tone, because of what they were saying, I was hearing my trauma from when I was 8 manifest in this person in front of me. And so if I don't stop to say, is what I'm experiencing the reality? Or is this something representative of something in my past or something I dislike? I need to analyze this. I can get out of my emotional brain more and back into this critical thinking brain to then analyze what's in front of me. And if we make a habit of doing this, and this is literally the first and second degree of Freemasonry we're talking about, if I make it a habit of doing this, then it becomes habitual. And before long, I'm doing that part, necessarily not thinking about it all the time. And I open my world up, I open my mind up, I start receiving knowledge that previously I wouldn't have been receptive to. But I do see a question in here, and I'll get to you, Philip, that says, why specifically have you decided not to practice the craft anymore? And I feel like I owe that to my brothers as to why I don't. It's because I reached a point going to lodge where I was not learning I was not having any more input given to me. I was giving more output, and the ideas that I was being challenged with were ideas that were, and I don't want to sound, like I'm above anybody, but they were beneath where I was at. I need to learn now, and I can learn about myself from any situation, but it became so redundant. These fights in the lodge, the arguments in the lodge, the business meeting in the lodge, and are people stopping coming from lodge because we want to learn about the craft more. These things pushed me away. And as I got older, I have more, I have more days behind me than in front of me. And I feel like I have so much work to do that I felt like going to lodge was putting me behind in my pursuit of knowledge and improving myself. That's why I stopped going to the craft. Hey, Philip, brother Rich, your mute is on, brother.
Can you hear me?
Hey, what's going on, man? Good to see you again.
Hey, thank you. Good to see you as well. Thank you very much for your time. Hey, quick question as far as subduing your passion. Metacognition is another terminology, correct?
Yes.
Are there more specific terms or more specific ways through meditation to obtain this?
Well, I would say yes, definitely meditation helps.
Okay.
But I would also say that empathetic confrontations to our thinking in discussions within safe spaces also develop that, right? Okay. Because if we're meditating and we're just reflecting without any input, any confrontation to the ideas that we're working on, then we get caught in our own echo chamber, right?
I can see
so that's one of the beautiful attributes originally of the Masonic Lodge, is that it was a place for brothers of different schools of thinking to come together in this safe space, this tiled lodge, and not to be judged by another brother because of the idea that we're presenting, and to have that dialogue within that safe space. So we come away from that lodge meeting, because that's originally originally it was beer, sitting and having beers, but it was discussions nonetheless, right? And so in that lodge was that tiled lodge, that safe space where we could challenge each other's thoughts in a friendly way. And that is literally what helps to unlock the mind more to ideas that could benefit not just us, but benefit humanity.
At one point you had a really good surrounding to where, you were able to sit down, metaphorically have beers and have discussions to where, you were able to let in other aspects, not just have your own. I see exactly what you're saying. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and unfortunately, to what you're saying, there's research that shows that within the last 12 to 13 years, specifically in the United States, I can't speak to other nations, but specifically in the United States, citizens, people who live here, have adopted more of a political ideology as their frame than previously religion was the frame in which people engaged each other. And so we've seen a shift in that, and that shift can be attributed to the internet and access to social media. These groups, going all the way back to MySpace and the Yahoo chat groups. I'm dating myself. Oscar, stop laughing. I'm dating myself, right?
I remember
and now we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have all these different avenues where we can have our own echo chambers and be intentionally exclusive from everybody else in the world. And so that reconfirmation of our pre-existing ideas just further exasperates our inability to see that this political ideology has taken over how we view each other versus how we used to religiously view each other. Because religiously, even if I was Muslim, Christian, or Jewish, it's all the same Abrahamic religions. There's a connection through Jesus in these three religions. So there's still conversations that can be interreligiously, that now, with this political frame being the basis of our conversations, once someone hears something that a different political party said, not even part of the campaign, but said or brought up as an issue, the person of the other political persuasion is now prejudiced immediately to that person. And that's why we have such a gridlock. So I appreciate you, brother. I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to see that everything, you know, with your surgery and everything came out right, and you look good, brother. You look really good. I'm happy to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Charles, I dropped something in the chat specifically around some of the pathways, frameworks we obviously use in building an anti-racist society, but just even from an institutional perspective, which always intrigues me because I always love to say that when you think about the craft as an institute, it's still in, I would probably even say stage 1 versus stage 2. But some people would, I'll give a stage 2 if necessary, right? Say all the nice things.
Yeah.
But, not wanting to really make much change.
Yes.
Part of that, of course, is getting even that opportunity for folks to understand, right? To even as you just mentioned, open up the receptors to hear versus the reaction, which we
not even to agree,
and
but to just hear.
Constantly it's like running into a brick wall every time, because it's the same individuals who are trying to express and in this kind of dominant culture, I joke, and I joke, I actually say this, part of, I think, this visceral reaction from a dominant society perspective, Freemasonry represents almost that last citadel, that last bastion, that last hope. And it's like, if we give this up, we lose everything. That's literally what we see.
That's literally why I'm speaking today, because and I had this conversation with the Grand Master of Oklahoma, and I think he's an amazing person. But we disagree on this, that, we just make good men better and they make their sons better. And I think that's pretty idealistic, that's altruistic. We would hope that would be the case. But at some point, we have to look back and say, if we are the vanguard, which we have been in the past, if we are to be the vanguard, and by my behavior tell society, why I'm privileged to be a member, what are we demonstrating? I think we're down to what, 865,000 members now, and just 10 years ago we were over 1 million. Why are we pushing people away? Well, we're emotionally comfortable with what has been. And a good example of that is, I remember I went in front of the Grand Lodge of Illinois. I went in front of the Grand Lodge of Illinois, and I know you gotta leave real quick. And we were talking about changing the ritual from the Holy Bible to the volume of sacred law, right? And Omar Ali got up there, and some of you are in the intellectual space know who Omar is. Got up there and spoke, and I got up spoke in the visceral. I had literally people threaten me to suggest that this is not a Judaic-Christian organization. I said, well, it's not. It's, what does a person who's Muslim, when I obligate them at the altar, I can't give them the Holy Bible? Well, you can just give them the Quran. Well, if I say the Holy Bible, though, I'm speaking to a certain sect of people. If I say volume of the sacred law, that's inclusion. So yeah, this emotional space is the first degree of Freemasonry that we're supposed to work on. And it's the degree that most of us, unfortunately, I don't think, try to master. So appreciate your comments, brother. Have an amazing day. I'm glad you were able to jump on and contribute. So that's all I have, Cleo. I thank you for this time, this space to share. I know we were going to be on for an hour, and it's almost 2 hours.
Yeah, because we got to wrap up. I got to go look at an open house.
Yeah, so I thank you for the time, and I'll leave it to you to close.
All right. Well, thank everybody for joining us. Be on the lookout for future presentations. I'm not sure who's going to be next because I had not planned ahead. Busy with work and other organization stuff outside of Masonry. But just keep visiting our Facebook page, the Marquis de Lafayette Philomath Society, and hope to see you again soon.
All right, you take care, and thank you again.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.